Brandon Mitchell had learned to read a room the way some men read stock tickers. 12 years in military intelligence, followed by 6 years developing encryption software for defense contractors, had taught him that danger rarely announced itself with sirens. It whispered. It hid in plain sight. It waited in battery compartments. The December snow fell soft outside their Bridgeport, Connecticut townhouse while 7-year-old Tommy sat cross-legged on the living room carpet, surrounded by torn wrapping paper. Jillian stood in the kitchen doorway, her dark hair pulled back, watching their son with that particular smile mothers reserved for Christmas mornings. Brandon sat on the couch, coffee growing cold in his hand, trying to ignore the familiar tension that crept up his spine whenever he thought about Jillian's parents. Daryl and Donna Harrington hadn't visited for the holidays. They never did. Instead, they'd sent a box from their home in Hartford, 30 miles north. The package had arrived 2 days ago, sitting on their porch with a shipping label, but no return address. Just a note inside. For our grandson, Merry Christmas, Grandma and Grandpa. Tommy held up a red and silver robot, about 10 inches tall, with articulated arms and LED eyes. The kind of toy that walked and talked, and probably cost more than it should. Look, Dad, it's awesome. Let's see if it works, Brandon said, setting down his coffee. Tommy was already popping open the battery compartment on the robot's back, his small fingers quick with the kind of enthusiasm only kids possessed on Christmas morning. Then his smile faltered. His eyebrows drew together in confusion. Daddy, why is this in here? Brandon crossed the room in 3 strides. Tommy held up something small, black, and rectangular. Not a battery. A micro SD card, taped inside the compartment where 4 AA batteries should have been. Brandon's training kicked in before his conscious mind fully processed what he was seeing. He took the card from Tommy's hand with deliberate casualness, his pulse already accelerating. Just a manufacturing thing, buddy. Sometimes they put test cards in toys. Let me grab some batteries from the drawer, and we'll get this guy walking around. He ruffled Tommy's hair, forced a smile, and walked to the kitchen. Jillian looked up from her phone. What's wrong? Nothing. Just need batteries. He kept his voice level, but something in his expression must have given him away because her eyes narrowed. Brandon. Later. He opened the utility drawer, grabbed 4 AA batteries, and returned to help Tommy load them into the robot. The toy chirped to life, walking in jerky circles while announcing it was ready to be his friend. Tommy's attention shifted completely, and Brandon slipped the SD card into his pocket. An hour later, after Tommy was engrossed in building a racetrack for another gift, Brandon retreated to his home office on the 2nd floor. The room was small, barely large enough for his desk, 2 monitors, and a secure external drive he kept locked in his filing cabinet. He shut the door, pulled the blinds, and examined the SD card under his desk lamp. It was unmarked. Standard 32 gigabytes card, the kind you could buy anywhere. Nothing unusual about it, except its location. Why would someone tape a memory card inside a toy's battery compartment? Brandon's mind cycled through possibilities. A mistake? Unlikely. A prank? Who would think that was funny? A message? But from whom? He knew he should take it straight to the police. Should hand it over without looking. But Brandon Mitchell hadn't survived 2 tours in Iraq and 8 years working with classified intelligence by ignoring his instincts. And his instincts told him he needed to know what this was before involving anyone else, especially before telling Jillian. His relationship with his in-laws had been strained since before the wedding. Daryl Harrington was old money Hartford, with a mansion in West Hartford's elite Prospect Avenue and connections that ran through the state like underground rivers. He made his fortune in real estate development, or so he claimed. Brandon had always sensed something else beneath the surface. Something that didn't add up about the way Daryl operated, the people he associated with, the way he always seemed to have his finger in pies that shouldn't connect. Donna was quieter, always perfectly dressed, always watching. She smiled, but her eyes never quite matched the expression. She'd been cold to Brandon from the start, making little comments about his background, his career, his family. Military, she'd said once, as if the word tasted bad. How practical. Jillian defended them. Always. They're just protective, she'd say. I'm their only daughter. She didn't see what Brandon saw. Or maybe she saw and chose not to believe it. He booted up his secure laptop, the one he used for freelance consulting work, and inserted the SD card into an external reader that wasn't connected to any network. Basic precaution. If this was malware, he wasn't letting it touch his main systems. The card mounted. One folder. Inside, 247 files. Video files. Document scans. Spreadsheets. Brandon opened the first video with his media player. The timestamp read 3 months ago. Grainy footage from what looked like a warehouse interior. Poor lighting. A man's voice off camera, giving instructions in English with an accent Brandon couldn't place. Eastern European? Maybe. The camera panned across a row of shipping containers. Then the camera moved closer. Through the open door of one container, Brandon saw faces. Young faces. Terrified faces. Women and girls, dozens of them, crowded together in a space meant for cargo. His blood went cold. He closed the video. Opened another. Same warehouse, different angle. This time he could see someone standing with a clipboard. The image was blurry, but when the person turned toward the camera, Brandon's stomach dropped. Daryl Harrington. Clear as day. Inspecting the container. Checking his watch. Making a phone call. Brandon sat back, his hands trembling. He opened a document file. Shipping manifests. Names, dates, ports of origin. Rotterdam, Athens, Odessa. Destinations, all ending at various points in Connecticut and New York. Another file. Financial records. Wire transfers. Accounts in the Cayman Islands. Amounts that made Brandon's head spin. Millions of dollars moving through shell corporations, all of them linking back to companies Daryl owned or controlled. He spent 90 minutes reviewing files, each one worse than the last. This wasn't just trafficking. This was a massive, organized operation with connections to international syndicates. Daryl Harrington wasn't just wealthy. He was running one of the largest human trafficking networks in the Northeast. And someone had put the evidence in a toy robot sent to Brandon's son. The question was, who and why? Brandon sat in his office until the winter sun began its early descent. He'd copied the entire SD card to his encrypted drive, then hidden the original in a location only he knew about, inside a hollowed-out networking textbook on his shelf. His mind raced through scenarios, each one darker than the last. Whoever sent this wanted him to find it. But why? Was it a threat? A warning? Or was someone trying to expose Daryl and using Brandon as the delivery mechanism? He thought about the shipping label. No return address, but that could be traced. He thought about Daryl's last visit, 6 months ago, when he made an odd comment about Brandon's computer skills and whether he ever did freelance work for private clients. Brandon had brushed it off at the time, assumed it was Daryl's typical condescension. Now it felt like a probe, a test. His phone buzzed. Jillian. Tommy wants to know if you'll come down and play with his new robot. He says it's not as fun without you. Guilt stabbed through him. His son was downstairs having the best Christmas of his young life, completely unaware that the toy his grandparents sent him had been carrying evidence of unspeakable crimes. That those grandparents who sent him birthday cards with $50 bills and called him champ on the phone were monsters. Be right down, he texted back. But he couldn't go down. Not yet. Not until he made a decision. Brandon pulled out a burner phone he kept for consulting work where clients needed discretion. He'd learned in the military that sometimes you needed a communication channel that couldn't be easily traced back to you. He scrolled through his contacts until he found a name he hadn't called in 4 years. Lewis Dodson. Lewis had been his commanding officer in Iraq, a straight arrow captain who'd later moved into the FBI after his service ended. Last Brandon heard, Lewis was running a field office somewhere in Connecticut. He dialed. Dodson. The voice was gruff, familiar. Sir, it's Brandon Mitchell. Not sure if you remember me. Mitchell. Hell yes, I remember. You're the one who cracked that insurgent communication network in Fallujah. Save a lot of lives. What's going on? This number isn't coming up on my system. That's intentional, sir. I need advice, off the record, about something I've stumbled into. A pause. I'm listening. Brandon chose his words carefully. Hypothetically, if a civilian came into possession of evidence showing a major criminal operation, and I mean major with interstate and international components, but that civilian has personal connections to the suspects. What's the protocol? Another pause, longer this time. Hypothetically, that civilian should bring the evidence to federal authorities immediately. The personal connection doesn't matter. In fact, it makes it more important to involve law enforcement for everyone's safety. This civilian we're talking about, he's not in danger, is he? Unknown, but his family might be. Then he needs to come in now. Not tomorrow. Tonight. Where are you located? Bridgeport. I'm in New Haven. There's a resident agency office in Bridgeport on Main Street. I can have agents there in 20 minutes. Or you can come to me. Either way, Mitchell, if this is what I think it is, every hour you wait is an hour those criminals can use to destroy evidence or hurt people. Or hurt you. Brandon looked at the door of his office. Beyond it, down the stairs, his wife was laughing at something Tommy said. The sound was pure and bright, and untainted by the darkness Brandon now carried. I'll come to you, he said, but I need to take care of something first. He ended the call and sat in silence for a long moment. Then he opened his laptop and drafted an email. No names, no details, just a message. If anything happens to me or my family, the evidence has been distributed to multiple secure locations with instructions for automatic release. He saved it as a draft, didn't send it. Insurance. Then he went downstairs. Jillian was in the kitchen, putting together sandwiches for a late lunch. Tommy was in the living room, making his robot dance with a stuffed bear. Normal. Everything looked so achingly normal. Hey, Brandon said, sliding his arms around Jillian's waist from behind. She leaned back into him. You okay? You've been weird all morning. I need to run an errand. Work thing. Emergency. She turned to face him, her brown eyes searching his. On Christmas. Client emergency. Software failure. I'll be back in a few hours, 3 at most. I promise. Brandon. He kissed her forehead. I love you. Tell Tommy I'll play with him when I get back. We'll have a whole afternoon. She didn't look convinced, but she nodded. Be careful. Roads might be icy. He grabbed his coat, the SD card still in his pocket, and headed for his car. The drive to New Haven took 40 minutes through light holiday traffic. Brandon spent the time thinking about how to explain this, how to frame it, how to protect Jillian from the worst of the blowback that was coming. Because it was coming. Once this ball started rolling, there would be no stopping it. The FBI field office was in a nondescript building downtown. Brandon parked, checked in at security, and was escorted to a conference room on the 3rd floor. Lewis Dodson was waiting, looking older than Brandon remembered, gray threading through his dark hair, but with the same sharp, assessing eyes. Mitchell. Lewis shook his hand firmly. This must be serious if you drove out here on Christmas. It is, sir. Call me Lewis. We're not in the army anymore. He gestured to a chair. 2 other people entered the room. A woman in her 40s with auburn hair pulled back severely, and a younger man with tired eyes and a loose tie. This is Special Agent Kay Stewart. She runs our Crimes Against Children and Human Trafficking Division. And Detective Kelvin Rivers from New Haven PD. We work together on task force operations. Whatever you've got, if it's big enough for you to call me, they need to hear it. Brandon sat, took out the SD card, placed it on the table. My son received a toy robot for Christmas from my in-laws this morning. This was hidden inside the battery compartment. I made a copy of the contents before coming here. Originals on the table. Kay Stewart leaned forward, her expression neutral, but her posture suddenly alert. And what's on it? Evidence of a large-scale human trafficking operation. Video footage. Financial records. Shipping manifests. Multiple victims. Interstate transport. International connections. My father-in-law appears in several videos. The room went very quiet. Lewis picked up the SD card with a gloved hand he'd pulled from his pocket. Your father-in-law's name? Daryl Harrington. I know who he is. Kay Stewart's voice was sharp. We've been trying to build a case against Harrington for 3 years. He's careful. Very careful. His lawyers are vicious. We've never been able to get close. Well, Brandon said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. Someone just handed you everything you need. Detective Rivers spoke for the first time, his voice a low rumble. Who sent this? Why did they send it to your house, to your kid? I don't know. That's a question I can't answer. But it had to be someone inside his operation. Someone who knew he'd recognize where it came from, or someone who wanted to use me as a courier. Lewis inserted the SD card into a laptop, pulled up the first video, watched 30 seconds. His jaw tightened. He looked at Kay, who watched another minute before nodding grimly. "We need to move on this now," she said. "If whoever sent this is inside the organization, they might have already tipped off Harrington that evidence is loose. He could be destroying records, moving victims, fleeing jurisdiction. Or, Rivers said quietly, he might be coming after the evidence. Which means coming after Mr. Mitchell and his family. Brandon had already thought of that. My wife doesn't know anything about this. She's at home with our son. She's Harrington's daughter." Kay's expression softened slightly. "That complicates things, but it doesn't change what we need to do. Lewis, we need a warrant, a task force, and protective custody options. Rivers, can you get units to Mitchell's house for surveillance?" "Already texting my lieutenant." Lewis stood. "Mitchell, you did the right thing bringing this to us. But from this moment forward, your life is going to get complicated. We're going to need you to walk us through everything on that card. We're going to need access to your house, your communications with your in-laws, everything. And you're going to need to tell your wife what's happening." "I know. Can you do that? Tell your wife her father is a human trafficker." Brandon thought about Jillian's face when she talked about her parents. The way she always made excuses for them, always wanted to believe the best. The way she defended them when Brandon had raised concerns over the years. "I could do what needs to be done," he said. Kay Stewart pulled out her phone and started making calls. Within minutes, the conference room transformed into a command center. More agents arrived. Laptops opened. The contents of the SD card spread across multiple screens. Brandon walked them through each file, explaining what he'd found, noting details they might miss. By 8 p.m., they had enough for a warrant. By 9 p.m., they had a tactical plan. By 10 p.m., they had a task force assembled. FBI agents, Connecticut State Police, New Haven, and Hartford PD, Homeland Security investigators. By 11 p.m., they were ready to move. Lewis pulled Brandon aside while the team geared up. "We're hitting 3 locations simultaneously. Harrington's home in West Hartford, a warehouse in New Haven we identified from the videos, and a shipping company in Bridgeport that appears on the manifests. We'll also be serving warrants on his financial institutions. This is going to be all over the news by morning." "What about my family?" 2 agents are already outside your house. We'll be keeping them there until we assess the threat level. Once we have Harrington and his associates in custody, you should be safe. But Mitchell," he paused, his expression grave. "There are going to be more people involved in this than we can arrest tonight. People who might blame you for bringing it down. You need to be prepared for that." "I am. Are you?" Lewis studied him. "Because this isn't like taking out an enemy position. This is going to be in your face, in your home, in your marriage. Your wife is going to have to choose between you and her parents. That's a hell of a thing to ask someone. She'll choose right. She's a good person. Let's hope you're right." At 11:47 p.m. on Christmas night, task force units hit all 3 locations simultaneously. Brandon waited in the FBI office, watching feeds from body cameras as agents breached the warehouse in New Haven. Inside, they found exactly what the videos had shown. Evidence of recent occupation, shipping containers, restraints, documentation. At the West Hartford mansion, Daryl Harrington answered the door in a silk robe and immediately demanded his lawyer. They arrested him anyway. Donna Harrington sat in her living room and said nothing at all, her face a perfect mask. By 2 a.m., they had 17 people in custody. By 3 a.m., they'd identified 43 victims who'd been moved through the operation in the last 6 months alone. By 4 a.m., Brandon was driving home to tell his wife that her parents were going to federal prison for the rest of their lives. The lights were still on in his house when he pulled into the driveway. 2 unmarked cars sat at the curb, agents inside watching his home. Brandon waved to them as he walked up the steps. Jillian met him at the door. "Where the hell have you been?" "I've been calling and texting." She stopped, looked at his face. Her expression shifted from anger to fear in an instant. "Brandon, what happened?" He closed the door behind him. "Is Tommy asleep?" "Yes." "Brandon, you're scaring me. We need to talk." Living room. Sit down. She did, her movements stiff with dread. Brandon sat across from her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. That SD card in Tommy's toy. I looked at it. It contained evidence of criminal activity. Serious criminal activity. I took it to the FBI. They just arrested your father and mother. Jillian's face went white. What? No, what are you talking about? Your father is running a human trafficking operation. Has been for years. The evidence is overwhelming. Videos, financial records, everything. They've arrested him, your mother, and 15 other people involved. You're lying. Her voice shook. You've always hated them. You've always. Jillian. He kept his voice steady, firm. I know this is devastating. I know it's impossible to process. But it's true. The FBI has been investigating your father for 3 years. Someone inside his organization sent us evidence. They hid it in Tommy's toy. No. She stood up, backing away from him. No. My father is a real estate developer. He's on the boards of charities. He's respected. This is insane. The evidence is real. You did this. Her voice rose, tears streaming down her face. You've been waiting for a chance to destroy them. You never gave them a chance. You always looked at them like they were criminals. Because they are. Brandon stood too, trying to keep his voice low so they wouldn't wake Tommy. Jillian, they're victims. Real people. Women and girls who were trafficked, abused, sold. Your father orchestrated it. Your mother knew. The evidence is undeniable. She shook her head violently, her hands over her ears. I don't believe you. I can't. He crossed her, gently pulled her hands down. You need to hear this. The FBI is going to want to talk to you. They're going to ask what you knew. You need to understand that I'm trying to protect you and Tommy. That's all I've ever tried to do. Protect us. She laughed bitterly through her tears. You just destroyed our family. I saved it, he said quietly. Your parents destroyed themselves. She pulled away from him, ran upstairs. A moment later, he heard their bedroom door slam. Brandon sat alone in the living room as dawn began to break outside. The robot toy still sat on the carpet, its LED eyes dark and lifeless. He picked up his phone and sent a message to Lewis, family notified. It went as well as expected. The response came immediately. Hang in there. This is just the beginning. Brandon knew he was right. But as he sat in the quiet house, listening to his wife cry behind their bedroom door, he also knew he'd made the only choice he could live with. The war was far from over. The media storm hit by mid-morning. Brandon woke from 2 hours of restless sleep on the couch to find news vans parked across the street. Prominent Hartford real estate developer arrested in major human trafficking sting scrolled across every local channel. His phone had 47 missed calls. Most were from numbers he didn't recognize, reporters, probably. But 3 were from a number he did recognize. Jillian's brother, Kerry Harrington. Brandon hadn't thought about Kerry in months. Jillian's younger brother lived in Boston, worked in finance, and visited Connecticut maybe twice a year. He'd always been cordial to Brandon, if distant. They'd never been close. He called back. What the hell did you do? Kerry's voice was ice. I turned in evidence of criminal activity. That's what I did. Evidence that destroyed my family. Evidence that shows what your family really is. Where do you stand in this, Kerry? Did you know what your father was doing? A long pause. I'm calling my attorney. And I'm calling Jillian. She needs to leave you. Today. The line went dead. Brandon set down the phone and heard footsteps on stairs. Jillian appeared, still in yesterday's clothes, her eyes red and swollen. She didn't look at him. I'm taking Tommy to my friend Tracy's house. Away from the cameras. Away from this. That's a good idea. The agents outside will follow you. For protection. She finally met his eyes. Protection from what? From who? You made us targets. Your father made you targets the moment he decided to traffic human beings. Stop saying that. Her voice broke. Just stop. I need time. I need to think. Jillian. No. She held up a hand. I can't look at you right now. I can't be in this house. I'll call you later. She went upstairs. 5 minutes later, she came down with Tommy, who looked confused and sleepy. Why are there cameras outside, Dad? There's some new stuff, champ. You're gonna hang out with Mrs. Davison today. Sound good, but I wanted to play with my new toys. You can play with them tonight. I promise. He watched them drive away, the unmarked car following at a discreet distance. Then he showered, changed, and prepared for the next phase. By noon, Louis Dodson was at his door with Kay Stewart and a forensic accountant named Benny Ochoa, who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. They set up in Brandon's dining room, spreading files and laptops across the table. We need you to walk us through your in-laws' finances, Kay said. Any accounts you knew about, any assets, any financial discussions you overheard. We're building the money trail, and every detail helps. Brandon spent 3 hours recounting conversations, holiday dinners, casual mentions of investments and properties. He told them about Daryl's business associates who'd attended family events, men with hard eyes and expensive suits who never quite fit the real estate developer image Daryl projected. There's one name that came up a few times, Brandon said, pulling up his mental files. Glenn Stark. Daryl mentioned him maybe 4, 5 times over the years, always in the context of shipping logistics. I remember because the name sounded like it should belong to a comic book hero, not a freight manager. Benny Ochoa's fingers flew across his keyboard. Glenn Stark. Got him. He owns Stark Freight Solutions, operates out of New Haven and Bridgeport. That's one of the companies on the manifests. He looked up excited. This is good. This connects your father-in-law directly to the transportation infrastructure. Stark wasn't among those arrested last night, Kane noted. We hit his warehouse, but he wasn't there. Put out a bolo. Louis leaned back in his chair, studying Brandon. Someone inside the organization sent you that evidence. Someone who knew Harrington well enough to know where he lived, to know he had a grandson, to know when to time the delivery. That's not a lot of people. I've been thinking about that, Brandon said. There's only a handful of people who'd have that level of access and knowledge. Maybe someone in his inner circle who got cold feet, or someone he betrayed. Or, Kay said slowly, someone who's positioning themselves to take over the operation with Harrington removed. The thought had occurred to Brandon, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. You think this could be an internal power play? We've seen it before. Organized crime doesn't work like corporations. When the boss goes down, someone always tries to fill the vacuum. If that's what's happening here, whoever sent you that evidence is still out there, still operating. Which means they might not be happy about how thoroughly we're dismantling the network, Louis added. They may have wanted Harrington removed, but they probably didn't want the whole operation burned to the ground. Brandon felt the implications settling over him like a cold weight. So I might have pissed off both sides. The Harrington loyalists who blame me for the arrests, and whoever sent the evidence because I went too far. Welcome to the wonderful world of organized crime investigation, Kay said with grim humor. Nobody's happy. Detective Rivers called Kay's phone. She put on speaker. What V you got, Kelvin? Interesting development. We executed the warrant on Donna Harrington's personal computer. She keeps meticulous records, journals, emails, encrypted files. Our tech team cracked it. She's been documenting everything for years. Every transaction, every shipment, every person involved. It's like she was building her own insurance policy. Or her own case file, Brandon murmured. We're thinking the same thing, Rivers continued. Some of the entries suggest Donna wasn't just aware of the operation. She was documenting it deliberately, almost like she was gathering evidence against her own husband. Kay and Louis exchanged glances. Marital strife? Kay suggested. Or self-preservation, Louis said. If she knew things might eventually collapse, she'd want leverage. Proof she cooperated. A way to negotiate. Brandon's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You made a serious mistake. Back off if you know what's good for you and your family. He showed it to Louis, who immediately called for a trace and signal analysis. But Brandon knew it would be useless. Whoever sent it would have used a burner, just like he had. We need to increase security on your house and family, Kay said firmly. I can handle myself. I don't doubt that, Mitchell. But we're not just talking about physical threats. These people have lawyers, money connections. They can destroy you financially, socially, legally. You need to be prepared for all of it. As if to punctuate her point, Brandon's phone rang. His attorney, Bernard Welch. Brandon, I just got served with papers on your behalf. Daryl Harrington is suing you for defamation, unlawful surveillance, and theft of proprietary information. He's claiming that SD card was actually his property and contained confidential business records, and that you stole it and falsely portrayed it to authorities as evidence of criminal activity. Brandon laughed without humor. He's in federal custody, facing trafficking charges, and he's suing me? He's fighting on every front. That's what people with money do. His attorneys are already filing motions to suppress the evidence, claiming illegal search and seizure. They're going after you to muddy the waters, make you look like a vindictive son-in-law with an axe to grind. I need you in my office tomorrow to prepare our response. After Bernard hung up, Brandon looked at the 3 law enforcement officers in his dining room. They're not going to make this easy. They never do, Case said. But we have the evidence. Video, financial records, victims who are already starting to talk. Harrington's legal strategy might buy him time, but it won't buy him freedom. What about bail? Brandon asked. Denied. The judge ruled him a flight risk, given the international connections and financial resources. He's staying locked up until trial. Small comfort, but comfort nonetheless. They worked until evening, building timelines and connections. Brandon's mind kept circling back to the central question: who sent the evidence? He thought about Donna's journals, her meticulous documentation. Could she have been the one? But why send it to Brandon instead of directly to authorities? Unless she couldn't risk being identified as the source. Unless she needed someone else to be the catalyst. His phone rang again. Jillian. Hey, he answered, stepping into the kitchen for privacy. Tommy's asking about you. I told him you had to work. I can come get him, bring him home. No, not yet. Brandon, I talked to my mother's attorney. He says they're claiming this is all a misunderstanding. That you took something out of context. Jillian, there's video evidence. There are victims in protective custody. This isn't about context. I know. Her voice was small. I know. I saw the news. I read some of the articles. They're saying terrible things about my father, about my mother, about our family. I'm sorry. Are you? She sounded exhausted. Because part of me thinks you've been waiting for this. Waiting to prove you were right about them. That's not fair. None of this is fair. She was crying again. My son's grandparents are being called monsters on television. My father might spend the rest of his life in prison. My mother, she choked on the words. How am I supposed to explain this to Tommy? How am I supposed to live with this? By knowing that stopping them was the right thing. That every day they operated was another day people suffered. Someone had to stop them. Why did it have to be you? Because it was me who found the evidence. Would you have rather I destroyed it? Pretended I didn't see it? Silence. Then, softly, I don't know. Maybe. Is that terrible? That part of me wishes you'd just thrown that card away and let us keep being a normal family. We were never going to be normal, Jillian. Not with what your parents were doing. Eventually, it would have caught up with them. With all of us. This way, at least we're on the right side. I need more time, she said. I'm staying at Tracy's tonight, too. I'll bring Tommy home tomorrow after school. We'll figure out what comes next. She hung up before he could respond. Brandon returned to the dining room, where Kay was packing up files. We're good for today. But Mitchell, be careful. Change your routines. Check your car before you drive it. Don't meet anyone alone. These people play for keeps. After they left, Brandon walked through his house, checking locks and windows. Everything looked normal, but nothing felt normal. His family was fractured. His in-laws were in custody. Someone out there was either grateful or furious with him. He couldn't tell which. He went back to his office and pulled up the encrypted files he'd saved from the SD card. Something had been bothering him, a detail he couldn't quite place. He went through the videos again, frame by frame. Then he saw it. In one video, in the background, partially obscured by a shipping container, with a figure. A woman, standing with her arms crossed, watching Daryl give orders. The quality was poor, but when Brandon enhanced it, zoomed in, he could make out her features. Donna Harrington. But that wasn't what made his blood run cold. It was her expression. Not afraid. Not uncomfortable. Not there under duress. She looked like she was in charge. He went through more videos. Found her in 3 others. In 2 of them, she was the one giving instructions. In one, she was inspecting the victims. This wasn't Daryl's operation that Donna had been documenting. This was their operation. Both of them. Maybe even Donna's more than his. and if Donna had been keeping records, documenting everything. Brandon pulled out his phone and called Lewis. I need you to look at something. Now, I think we've been looking at this wrong. An hour later, Lewis was back in his office, studying the enhanced images. Jesus, she's not a witness. She's a co-conspirator, maybe the primary conspirator, which means her journals aren't insurance, Brandon said. They're a record. She was keeping score. And if she sent me that evidence, why would she send evidence that incriminates herself? Unless it doesn't. Not all of it. Brandon pulled up the file directory again. What if she sent me carefully curated evidence? Enough to take down her husband and his associates, but not enough to fully implicate herself? She could claim she was a victim, that Daryl forced her involvement. Lewis grabbed his phone and called Kay. We need to re-interview Donna Harrington. Tonight. And we need to go through every piece of evidence with the assumption that she's the real architect of this operation. Brandon sat back, his mind racing. If Donna had sent the evidence, she'd done it for a reason. To remove Daryl? To take over? To cut a deal with prosecutors? And more importantly, did she know Brandon had gone to the FBI, or had she expected him to do something else with the information? His phone buzzed. Another message from the unknown number. You're smarter than I thought, but not smart enough. Watch your back. This time, Brandon didn't show it to Lewis. He saved it, added it to his own growing file, and made a decision. If Donna Harrington thought she could use him as a pawn in whatever game she was playing, she was wrong. Brandon Mitchell had taken down insurgent networks in Iraq. He'd tracked foreign agents through encrypted communications. He'd spent years learning how to see patterns others missed. And he was going to figure out exactly what Donna was planning. Then he was going to make sure she paid for every life she destroyed. The investigators worked through the night while Brandon tried to sleep, but couldn't. His mind kept turning over the pieces, trying to make them fit. By dawn, he had a theory. By mid-morning, when Lewis called him back to the FBI office, he had a plan. Donna Harrington lawyered up completely. Lewis said when Brandon arrived, "Won't say a word without her attorney present." But we confronted her with the enhanced images showing her active participation. She didn't even flinch, just smiled. She's proud of it, Brandon said. She thinks she's smarter than everyone. Smarter than her husband, smarter than you, smarter than me. She might be, Kay admitted. Her attorney is already floating a deal. She'll testify against Daryl and name every other player in the organization in exchange for a reduced sentence. She's claiming coercion, duress, years of abuse. It's bullshit. We know that. But it's convincing bullshit, and her attorney is good. Really good. She hired Edwin Crowley out of New York. Former federal prosecutor, never lost a case, specializes in impossible defenses. Brandon felt anger rising in his chest. So she gets away with it? She destroys dozens of lives, maybe hundreds, and she gets a deal? The victims are what matters, Kay said gently. If her testimony helps us dismantle the entire network, identify more victims, prevent future trafficking, that's worth considering a deal. No, Brandon stood. There has to be another way. Mitchell, she sent me that evidence for a reason. She has a plan. And part of that plan is convincing you she's a victim so she can walk away with minimal punishment. We can't let that happen. Lewis looked at him steadily. What are you thinking? I'm thinking I need to talk to her. That's a terrible idea. Probably. But she used me. She put evidence in my son's toy, knowing exactly what I'd do with it. She made me part of her plan without my knowledge or consent. I deserve to look her in the eye and understand why. Kay shook her head. She'll never agree to meet with you without her attorney present, and her attorney will never allow it. Then I'll make her want to meet with me. Brandon pulled out his phone and drafted a message, showed it to them. I know what you did. I know why you sent it to me, and I know what you're really planning. We need to talk. Come alone, or I go public with what I know. You're bluffing, Lewis said. You don't know what her endgame is. No, but she doesn't know that I don't know, and she can't risk me having figured it out. He sent the message to the Harrington family's public contact number, knowing it would reach Donna's attorney. Then they waited. For hours later, Edwin Crowley called the FBI office. My client would like to speak with Mr. Mitchell. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. at a neutral location. Present will be myself, my client, one FBI representative, and Mr. Mitchell. No recording devices. Conversation is off the record. We'll never agree to off the record, Kay said. Then there's no meeting. My client has information Mr. Mitchell wants. He apparently has information she wants. They can exchange it, but they can both sit in uncertainty. Your choice. Lewis looked at Brandon. This is risky and irregular as hell. I know. You sure about this? Brandon thought about Tommy opening that toy robot, about Jillian crying in their bedroom, about the victims he'd seen in those videos, their terrified faces. I'm sure. The meeting was set for a conference room in a Hartford law office, neutral ground between the FBI and Crowley's firm. Brandon arrived early, dressed in a suit, carrying nothing but his phone, which he surrendered at the door per the agreement. Lewis was the FBI representative. They sat on one side of a long mahogany table while they waited. At 2:04, the door opened. Edwin Crowley entered first, 60s, silver hair, expensive suit, the kind of man who looked like he belonged in courtrooms. Behind him came Donna Harrington. She looked different out of custody, perfectly composed in a dark blue dress, hairstyled, makeup understated. She could have been heading to a charity luncheon. Only her eyes gave her away, cold, calculating, assessing Brandon like he was a chess piece she was deciding whether to capture or sacrifice. Mr. Mitchell, she said, sitting across from him. We finally have a chance to talk properly. Without my daughter in the room. Mrs. Harrington, please, call me Donna. We're family, after all. The words dripped with poison. Crowley cleared his throat. Let's establish ground rules. This conversation is confidential. Nothing said here can be used in court proceedings against either party. My client agreed to this meeting as a courtesy, and because you implied you have information relevant to her case. I do, Brandon said, keeping his voice steady. I know you sent me that SD card. I know you did it deliberately, timed to arrive on Christmas when you knew my family would be together. I know you wanted me to find it. Donna smiled slightly. That's not a revelation, Mr. Mitchell. Of course I sent it. Lewis stiffened beside him, but Brandon kept his focus on Donna. Why? Because you were the perfect person to find it. A former military intelligence officer with a strong sense of justice. A man who already suspected my husband of impropriety. A man who would do exactly what you did, run straight to the authorities with evidence of wrongdoing. You were predictable. That made you useful. You used me to take down your husband. I used you to take down a monster who'd lost sight of the original purpose of our work. Brandon leaned forward. The original purpose. You're talking about the trafficking operation like it was a business venture. It was, is, and it could have continued to be profitable and relatively low risk if Daryl hadn't gotten greedy. If he hadn't started cutting corners, involving careless people, expanding too quickly. She folded her hands on the table. I spent 20 years building that network carefully. Then my husband nearly destroyed it in 3 years of mismanagement. So you decided to remove him. I decided to protect what I'd built. With Daryl gone, I could testify against his poor decisions, distance myself from his more egregious choices, and emerge with my core operations intact. Brandon felt sick. Your core operations. You mean the parts where you still traffic people. Don't be naive, Mr. Mitchell. The demand doesn't disappear because we're arrested. It just shifts to someone else. Someone less careful. Someone more brutal. At least I ran things with a certain standard. A standard. Brandon's voice was flat. You destroyed lives. I provided opportunities. Most of the women in our operation came from situations far worse than anything I subjected them to. At least with me, they were fed, housed, given medical care when needed. Enough. Lewis cut her off. You're describing human trafficking and trying to dress it up as humanitarian work. It's disgusting. Donna turned her cold gaze to him. Agent Dotson, isn't it? Tell me, how many trafficking operations has the FBI dismantled in the last decade? And how many victims have you actually helped versus simply relocated to different forms of exploitation? At least I didn't pretend to be a savior. Brandon forced himself to stay calm. You still haven't explained why you chose Christmas. Why you sent it in a toy meant for my son. For the first time, something flickered in Donna's expression. Because I knew it would make you angry. Personally angry. I needed you to have an emotional stake, not just a moral one. If you'd simply stumbled across evidence, you might have hesitated, weighed options, consulted with Jillian first. But putting it in your son's toy, that made it immediate. That made it a violation of your family. That ensured you'd act quickly, decisively, before Daryl could destroy evidence or flee. You manipulated me. I motivated you. There's a difference. And my wife? Your daughter? Did you consider what this would do to her? Donna's expression hardened. Jillian made her choice when she married you instead of the man I'd selected for her. She chose you over family. So I used you against the family. Poetic, don't you think? Brandon understood then, with perfect clarity, exactly what kind of person his mother-in-law was. Not just a criminal, a sociopath. Someone who saw people, even her own daughter, as tools to be used or discarded based on their utility. What's your endgame? He asked. You testify against your husband, you get a reduced sentence, and then what? You think you'll walk back into the operation? Of course not. I'll retire. My testimony will be thorough enough to satisfy prosecutors and keep me out of prison, vague enough to preserve my actual network. I'll serve perhaps 5 years, maybe less with good behavior. By the time I'm out, the immediate heat will have died down. My offshore accounts will still be secure, and I'll have time to write my memoirs. She smiled. I'm thinking of calling it The Art of Supply and Demand. Brandon felt rage building in his chest, but he kept it controlled. You're assuming you'll get a deal. That prosecutors will accept your testimony. They will, because I have information they need. Names, locations, routes, victims. I can help them dismantle operations across 3 continents. They need me. Actually, Brandon said quietly, they don't. Donna's smile faltered slightly. What? You sent me everything I needed to understand your operation. Financial records, shipping manifests, contact lists. I spent last night mapping it all out, cross-referencing with public records and information I had access to through my security clearance. I built a network diagram showing the entire operation, every player, every route, every connection. He pulled a flash drive from his pocket. He'd kept it with him despite surrendering his phone. Slid it across the table. That's a copy. I shared the original with the FBI this morning. It has everything your testimony would have provided, plus analytics your memory couldn't match. So you see, Donna, you're not as valuable as you think you are. The prosecutors don't need your testimony. They just need to keep you in prison where you belong. Donna's face went pale. Crowley grabbed the flash drive, but Lewis plucked it from his hand. That's evidence now. Nice try. This meeting is over, Crowley said, standing. And that stunt just contaminated any potential deal negotiations. There won't be any deal negotiations, Lewis said. Mrs. Harrington, you're under arrest for human trafficking, conspiracy, racketeering, money laundering, and about 30 other charges. Your testimony is worthless. You're going to federal prison for the rest of your life. Donna stared at Brandon. For the first time since he'd met her, he saw genuine emotion in her eyes. Not remorse. Not fear. Rage. You stupid, insignificant little man, she hissed. Do you have any idea what you've done? I could have made this easy. I could have given you your precious justice and moved on with my life. But now I'm going to make sure you lose everything. Your wife will never forgive you. Your son will grow up knowing his father destroyed his family. You'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. No, Brandon said calmly. I'll spend the rest of my life knowing I stopped you. That's enough. Security entered to escort Donna back to custody. She fought against them, still screaming threats, until they physically carried her from the room. Crowley followed, already on his phone trying to do damage control. When the door closed, Lewis let out a long breath. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen a civilian do. Probably both. Did you really map out the entire operation in one night? Most of it. Enough to prove her testimony wasn't essential. The rest was bluffing. She believed it. She believed it because she couldn't imagine someone outsmarting her. Brandon stood, his legs shaky from adrenaline. Is this really over? For the legal side? We have enough to convict both Harringtons and most of their network. Trials will take years, but they're going to prison. For you personally? Lewis shrugged. That depends on a lot of things that have nothing to do with law enforcement. He meant Jillian. Brandon knew. That evening, Jillian came home with Tommy. Brandon had ordered pizza, Tommy's favorite, and set up his son's new toys in the living room, trying to create some sense of normalcy. Jillian stood in the doorway while Tommy ran upstairs to his room. I heard about what happened today. My mother's attorney called me. He said you confronted her. I did. He said you ruined any chance she had of getting a deal. She doesn't deserve a deal, Jillian. She's my mother. Her voice broke. Whatever she did, she's still my mother. I know, and I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry I stopped her. Jillian looked at him for a long moment. I've been thinking a lot the last few days. About us. About everything. Brandon's chest tightened. And I'm angry. I'm so angry with you. You tore apart my family. You made my son's grandparents into villains. You. She stopped, tears streaming down her face. But you were right. You were right, and I'm furious that you were right. Because now I have to live with knowing that my parents are monsters. That I defended them. She couldn't finish. Brandon crossed to her, pulled her into his arms. She resisted for a moment, then collapsed against him, sobbing. I don't know how to forgive you, she whispered. But I don't know how not to either. You don't have to decide now. Take whatever time you need. Will you wait for me while I figure this out? Yes, he said without hesitation. As long as you need. That night, he slept on the couch again, but felt different, like maybe there was a path forward, even if neither of them could see it clearly yet. And in his office upstairs, locked in his safe, Brandon kept his own insurance. Copies of everything, secured locations known only to him, instructions to be opened if anything happened to his family. Because Donna had been right about one thing. The operation didn't end just because the leaders were arrested. There were others out there, people who might blame Brandon, people who might want revenge. But Brandon Mitchell had faced worse enemies in worse circumstances. And he'd survived. He'd survived this too. The story of how a toy robot destroyed a criminal empire was just beginning. But the hardest chapter, rebuilding a family from the ashes of that destruction, that was something no training could have prepared him for. He'd figured out anyway. That's what fathers did. The federal courthouse in New Haven was a fortress of gray stone and bulletproof glass, designed to withstand everything from protests to potential attacks. Brandon walked through security on a Tuesday morning 6 weeks after Christmas, his hands steady even though his heart raced. Today was the preliminary hearing for Daryl and Donna Harrington. Today, he'd have to face them again. Jillian hadn't come. She told Brandon last night that she couldn't. Not yet. She was still processing, still trying to reconcile the parents she'd thought she knew with the monsters they'd proven to be. She and Tommy were staying with her friend Tracy, though she'd been spending more evenings at home, trying to find a new normal. Small steps. That's what their marriage counselor called it. Small steps toward healing. Brandon found Lewis and Kay in the hallway outside courtroom 4. With them was a woman he didn't recognize, late 30s, exhausted eyes, clutching a folder like a lifeline. Mitchell, this is Marta Wise, Lewis said. She's a social worker with the Office of Refugee Resettlement. She's been working with the victims. Marta shook his hand. I wanted to meet you, to thank you. Because of what you did, we've identified 43 victims and helped them access services. 12 have already been reunited with family in their home countries. The others are in safe housing, receiving trauma counseling. I'm glad they're safe, Brandon said, and meant it. The stories they've told. Marta's voice caught. What the Harringtons did to them. Some of these women are so young. 16, 17. Taken from their homes with promises of jobs, education. Then trapped. Abused. She wiped her eyes. I've been doing this work for 15 years, and I've never seen an operation this extensive, this brutal. Will they testify? Brandon asked. Some will. Some are too traumatized. But we have 8 who are willing to go on record, including one woman who was held for 3 years. She speaks perfect English now. She wants to look Donna Harrington in the eye and tell her exactly what she stole from her. The courtroom doors opened. They filed in Brandon, the FBI agents, social workers, prosecutors, defense attorneys, reporters. The gallery filled quickly. Brandon found a seat in the 3rd row, close enough to see, but not so close he'd be a distraction. Daryl Harrington entered first, in an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed. He looked diminished somehow, smaller than Brandon remembered. He glanced around the courtroom with an expression of barely contained fury. Then his eyes found Brandon. The hatred in that gaze was palpable. Brandon met it evenly, didn't look away. Then Donna entered, also in orange, also cuffed. But unlike her husband, she moved with eerie grace, as if she were walking into a boardroom rather than a courtroom. She scanned the gallery with clinical precision, taking inventory. Where her eyes found Brandon, she smiled. Small, controlled, terrifying. Judge Randy Dominguez took the bench. A stern man in his 60s, known for his no-nonsense approach to organized crime cases. He reviewed the charges, which took nearly 10 minutes to read aloud. Human trafficking, racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, witness tampering. The list went on. Edwin Crowley, Donna's attorney, stood first. Your Honor, my client wishes to enter a plea of not guilty to all charges. Furthermore, we're filing motions to dismiss several counts based on prosecutorial overreach and insufficient evidence. Not guilty, plea noted. Judge Dominguez cut him off. Motions can be filed through proper channels. Next, Daryl's attorney, a younger man named Israel Brock who looked out of his depth, also entered a not guilty plea. Then the prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Graciela Spears, stood. She was formidable, late 40s, sharp suit, sharper mind. Brandon had met with her twice in the past weeks, walking her through evidence. Your Honor, the government has overwhelming evidence in this case. Video testimony, financial records, victim statements, and physical evidence from multiple crime scenes. We're requesting that both defendants be held without bail pending trial. They have significant financial resources, international connections, and have demonstrated both the means and motive to flee jurisdiction. We object, Crowley said. My client has deep ties to this community. Deep ties to a criminal enterprise, Spears interrupted. Mrs. Harrington has offshore accounts totaling an estimated $30 million. She has contacts in 15 countries. She is a significant flight risk. Judge Dominguez reviewed the filings in front of him. I'm inclined to agree with the government. Both defendants will remain in custody pending trial. Trial date is set for September 12th. This court is, Your Honor, Donna's voice rang out. Clear, controlled. I'd like to address the court. Crowley grabbed her arm, whispering urgently, but she shook him off and stood. Mrs. Harrington, that's not, Judge Dominguez began. I understand that speaking now is irregular, Donna said calmly. But I think it's important that certain facts be entered into the record. Facts about how this case began. Facts about the person responsible for bringing these charges. Brandon's stomach dropped. Mrs. Harrington, you need to sit down and speak through your attorney. Brandon Mitchell, Donna continued, ignoring the judge, turning to look directly at Brandon. My son-in-law, a man who has had an agenda against my family since the day he married my daughter. A man who saw an opportunity to destroy us and took it. That's enough, Judge Dominguez said sharply. One more word and you'll be held in contempt. He tampered with evidence, Donna said quickly, the words tumbling out. He admits he copied files from the SD card before turning it over to authorities. Who knows what he altered? What he added? He has the technical skills. He had the motive. This entire case is built on evidence he handled alone with no chain of custody. Mrs. Harrington, SIT down. The judge's voice boomed through the courtroom. Bailiffs moved toward Donna, but she kept talking, her voice rising. He planted that card. He fabricated evidence to frame us. My husband and I are victims of vendetta. The bailiffs seized her, forcing her back into her seat. Crowley was on his feet, tried to object to his own client being restrained. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Brandon sat frozen, his mind reeling. This was her strategy. Donna was trying to seed doubt, suggest evidence tampering. It was brilliant in its audacity and terrifying in its implications. Judge Dominguez slammed his gavel repeatedly. Order. This court will have order. He glared at Donna. Mrs. Harrington, you are in contempt. Bailiff, remove her from the courtroom. This preliminary hearing is concluded. Defense attorneys, control your clients, or I'll hold you in contempt as well. They dragged Donna out, still shouting. Daryl watched her go with an expression Brandon couldn't read. Then they took him too. In the hallway afterward, Graciela Spears pulled Brandon aside. That was a show. She's trying to poison the jury pool, plant seeds for reasonable doubt. Will it work? Not if we're smart about how we present evidence. The chain of custody issue is real, but we have the original SD card, and our forensic analysis confirms Mitchell's copies are identical to the original. We can prove he didn't alter anything. But the question will be in people's minds now. Jurors will wonder. Let them wonder. We have 43 victims, dozens of witnesses, financial records from independent sources, video evidence from multiple locations. Donna Harrington can claim conspiracy all she wants. The evidence speaks for itself. Brandon wished he had her confidence. That evening, Brandon got a call from an unknown number. He almost didn't answer. He'd gotten dozens of threatening calls in recent weeks, mostly from blocked numbers, mostly leaving vague warnings. His voicemail was full of them, but something made him pick up. Mr. Mitchell? The voice was male, unfamiliar. Young. Who is this? My name is Eduardo Finn. I worked for Daryl Harrington in his legitimate real estate business. I had nothing to do with the other stuff, but I need to talk to you. Brandon's instincts fired. How did you get this number? I have my ways. Please just listen. I know who sent you that SD card. Brandon's pulse quickened. Who? Not over the phone. Can you meet me? Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. There's a coffee shop in Bridgeport, corner grind on State Street. Public place, lots of people. I just need 20 minutes. Why should I trust you? Because I'm risking my life making this call. Because if Donna finds out I'm talking to you, I'm dead. And because you deserve to know the truth about who really set this in motion. The line went dead. Brandon immediately called Lewis and told him about the conversation. They debated whether it was safe, whether it might be a trap. Finally, they agreed. Brandon would meet Eduardo, but with FBI surveillance. Agents would be positioned throughout the coffee shop, ready to intervene if anything went wrong. The next morning, Brandon arrived at Corner Grind 15 minutes early. The place was crowded with morning commuters grabbing coffee and bagels before work. He spotted at least 3 people he was fairly certain were FBI. They had that particular awareness, that way of scanning a room that marked them as law enforcement. At 8:02, a young man entered. Mid-20s, nervous eyes, cheap suit that didn't quite fit. He ordered coffee, paid cash, then approached Brandon's table in the back corner. Mr. Mitchell? Eduardo. Thanks for coming. He sat, hands wrapped around his coffee cup. I don't have much time. My shift starts at 9, and if I'm not there, people will ask questions. What do you know? I've worked for Daryl Harrington's development company for 3 years. Just basic office stuff, filing, data entry, scheduling. I never knew about the trafficking. Never suspected. I thought he was a legitimate businessman. Okay, but there was someone else who worked there. Daryl's assistant, Sonia Miller. She handled his calendar, his correspondence, his personal affairs. She's been with him for 12 years. She knows everything. Brandon leaned forward. You think Sonia sent me the evidence? I know she did. I saw her making copies of files 3 weeks before Christmas. She told me Daryl had asked her to back up important documents, but she was nervous. Scared. She kept looking over her shoulder. Then 2 weeks before Christmas, she quit. Just walked out. Didn't even collect her last paycheck. Where is she now? I don't know. I tried calling her, but her number's disconnected. She disappeared. But Mr. Mitchell, Eduardo's voice dropped to a whisper. I think Donna knows Sonia was the leak, and I think she's looking for her. There were men asking about Sonia at the office last week. Men who don't work for the company. Men who looked dangerous. Brandon felt ice in his veins. You think Donna put a hit out on her? I think Donna doesn't forgive betrayal, and Sonia betrayed her. Why are you telling me this? Eduardo met his eyes. Because Sonia was my friend. She was a good person who got caught up in something evil. She tried to do the right thing, and now she's running for her life. You need to find her before Donna's people do. You need to protect her. I'm not law enforcement, but you have connections. You brought down the Harringtons. If anyone can help Sonia, it's you. He stood. I've said too much already. I need to go. Wait. How do I contact you if I have more questions? You don't. This conversation never happened. I was never here. Eduardo handed Brandon a piece of paper. That's the last address I have for Sonia. Apartment in New Haven. She's probably not there anymore, but it's a start. He walked out, leaving his coffee untouched. Brandon texted the address to Lewis, then sat for another 5 minutes, thinking. Sonia Miller, Daryl's assistant. A woman who'd worked inside the operation for 12 years, then suddenly developed a conscience and tried to bring it down. She was the real hero in this story. And if Donna's people found her first, she was dead. By noon, FBI agents had searched Sonia's last known address. The apartment was empty, abandoned weeks ago, but they found a few items left behind. A journal, some personal papers, and a burner phone with one number saved in the contacts. Kay called Brandon. We traced the number. It's another burner, but we got cell tower data showing it was last active in Vermont. Small town called Brattleboro, right near the New Hampshire border. She's running. Smart girl. We're going to bring her in. She's a material witness. And honestly, she's safer in protective custody than anywhere else. What if she doesn't want to come in? Then we'll have to convince her. This woman risked everything to expose the Harringtons. We owe it to her to keep her alive. They found Sonia Miller 3 days later in a motel outside Brattleboro, registered under a fake name, paying cash. FBI agents knocked on her door at 6 a.m. When she opened it, they found a woman in her early 40s, exhausted and terrified, with a go bag already packed by the bed. She'd been expecting someone, just not law enforcement. Lewis brought her back to Connecticut and set her up in a safe house outside Hartford. Then he called Brandon. She wants to meet you. Why? She says you're the reason she's still alive. She sent you that evidence because she'd watched you with your family at company events. She said you were the only person connected to the Harringtons who she thought would do the right thing. Lewis paused. She specifically asked to thank you in person. They met the next day in the safe house, a suburban ranch home that looked like every other house on the block. Inside, 2 U.S. Marshals provided security. Sonia sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cup of tea, looking fragile but determined. Mr. Mitchell, she said when he entered. I'm sorry I put you in this position. I'm sorry I involved your son. Why did you? Brandon sat across from her. Why not take the evidence directly to the FBI? Because I was a coward. Her voice was steady despite the tears in her eyes. For 12 years, I told myself I was just doing my job. I was just Daryl's assistant. I wasn't responsible for what he did with the information I gave him, the appointments I scheduled, the correspondence I handled. But I knew. Deep down, I always knew. What changed? I met one of the victims. Her name was Melody. She was 19, from Ukraine. She'd been promised a job as a nanny for a wealthy family in New York. Instead, she ended up, Sonia couldn't finish. I saw her in the warehouse. She looked at me, right at me, and she said, in broken English, please help. And I walked away. I walked away because I was too afraid. She wiped her eyes. I couldn't sleep after that. Couldn't eat. I started making copies of files, thinking I'd build enough courage to go to the police. But I couldn't do it. I kept thinking about Donna, about what she'd do if she found out. So I thought, maybe if I gave the evidence to someone else, someone who didn't know it came from me, someone who'd make the right choice. Why me? Because at the company Christmas party 2 years ago, I overheard you and Jillian talking. She said something about one of Daryl's business associates making her uncomfortable, and you told her to trust her instincts. You said good people shouldn't ignore their gut when something felt wrong. I remember that. And when I needed someone who'd act on evidence instead of burying it, I thought of you. Brandon felt a wave of emotions he couldn't name. You put your life at risk. I put yours at risk too, and your family's. I'll never forgive myself for that. You saved lives. 43 victims and counting. That matters more than anything else. Donna's going to try to kill me. Sonia said it matter-of-factly. Even from prison. She has connections, resources. She told me once that betrayal was the only sin she couldn't forgive. The Marshals will protect you. For how long? A year? 5 years? Eventually, I'll have to testify. I'll have to step into a courtroom and face her. And she'll be smiling, because she'll know that even if she goes to prison, she'll eventually find a way to reach me. Brandon leaned forward. What if she couldn't? What if we made sure she never got the chance? Sonia looked at him sharply. What do you mean? Donna's strategy is to seed doubt, to suggest the evidence was tampered with. She's trying to paint herself as a victim of a conspiracy. But if you testify, if you explain exactly how you collected the evidence, where it came from, why you did it, that destroys her defense. I'm already planning to testify. I mean testify powerfully, completely, with details only someone on the inside would know. You can corroborate everything on that SD card. You can explain the operation from the ground up. You can make it impossible for any jury to believe Donna's lies. They'll crucify me on cross-examination. Let them. You're not on trial. You're the whistleblower, the woman who risked everything to do the right thing. Juries love that story. Sonia studied him. You're not just thinking about convicting the Harringtons. You're thinking about something else. I'm thinking about making sure they never get out, that they die in prison, that they never have the chance to hurt anyone ever again. And you think my testimony can do that? I think your testimony, combined with victim statements, combined with forensic evidence, can bury them so deep they'll never see daylight. Brandon's voice was hard. Donna used me. She used my family. She used you. She used dozens of innocent people. I want her to pay for every single one. Sonia was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay, tell me what you need me to do. Over the next 3 months, Brandon worked with prosecutors and the FBI to build an airtight case. Sonia's testimony was the keystone. She provided context, details, and insider knowledge that transformed raw evidence into a devastating narrative. But Brandon didn't stop there. He dove into the financial records, using his technical expertise to map out money flows, identify hidden accounts, trace transactions back to their sources. He built visualizations showing exactly how the operation worked, making complex financial crimes simple enough for a jury to understand. He tracked down former employees who'd quit or been fired. People like Eduardo who'd suspected something was wrong, but never spoke up. He convinced several to testify about suspicious activities, odd comments, warning signs they'd ignored. He coordinated with international law enforcement to identify victims in other countries, people who'd never made it to the U.S. but who'd been recruited through the Harringtons network. And through it all, he maintained a careful distance from Jillian while they worked on their marriage. She came home more frequently. They had dinners together, the three of them, try to rebuild something that felt like a family. Tommy asked fewer questions about why Grandma and Grandpa were on TV. He seemed to accept that grown-ups sometimes did very bad things. The innocence of children, Brandon thought, both a blessing and a tragedy. In August, 1 month before trial, Kay Stewart called Brandon with news. We've identified the money man, the financial architect behind the operation's offshore structure. Who? Glenn Stark, the shipping logistics guy you mentioned. Turns out he's not just a freight manager. He's a former investment banker who got disbarred for fraud. He's been running the Harringtons' money laundering operation for 15 years. Where is he? That's the thing. He's gone. Disappeared the day after the initial arrests. We've got warrants out, but he's sophisticated. Probably in a country without an extradition treaty. Brandon felt frustration building. So he gets away? Maybe. Maybe not. We froze his accounts, seized his assets. He's cut off from his money. That might flush him out eventually, but it didn't feel like justice. Stark was a key player, and he'd slipped through the net. Unless an idea began forming in Brandon's mind. Dangerous, possibly illegal, but effective. He spent 3 days considering it. Then he made a decision. He'd learned in military intelligence that sometimes you had to think like your enemy. And if Glenn Stark thought like a financial criminal, then money was his weakness. Brandon created a fake email account and sent a message to one of Stark's known associates, using information from the seized records. He pretended to be a former client looking to move assets offshore, mentioning Stark's name specifically. He made the bait obvious enough to get Stark's attention, but subtle enough not to trigger suspicion. Then he waited. For days later, he got a response. Not from Stark directly, but from an intermediary. My client might be able to help you. What amount are we discussing? Brandon replied with a figure large enough to be interesting. They exchanged messages over a week, slowly building trust. Finally, The intermediary suggested a meeting. My client prefers face-to-face transactions for amounts this size. Can you travel to Montreal? Montreal, Canada. Close enough for Stark to feel safe. Far enough from Connecticut to think he was beyond U.S. law enforcement's reach. Brandon forwarded everything to Lewis. Can you work with Canadian authorities? Jesus, Mitchell. You're running your own sting operation. I'm applying pressure. You're the one with the badge. Lewis laughed despite himself. This is insane. And brilliant. And probably going to get us both fired. Give me 2 days. With Canadian law enforcement and FBI coordination, they set up the trap. Brandon would attend the meeting, wired, with agents positioned throughout the restaurant where Stark wanted to meet. The moment Stark appeared, they'd move in. Brandon told Jillian he was traveling to New York for consulting work. He didn't mention Montreal, didn't mention the danger. Some things were better explained after they were over. The restaurant was upscale French, the kind of place where criminals could meet in plain sight and blend with wealthy clientele. Brandon arrived early, ordered wine he didn't drink, and tried to look like a nervous businessman with money to hide. Glenn Stark walked in at 7:32 p.m. He was exactly what Brandon expected. 50s, expensive suit, the kind of confidence that came from never being held accountable. He scanned the restaurant, clocked Brandon, and approached with a smile. Mr. Johnson, he used the fake name Brandon had provided. Mr. Stark, they shook hands. Stark sat, ordered scotch, made small talk about the weather. Professional, careful, and he got down to business. You mentioned wanting to move $8 million out of U.S. jurisdiction. That's a significant amount. I'll need to understand the source. Inheritance, Brandon lied smoothly. My father recently passed. The money's clean, but I'd rather minimize tax exposure. Of course. Stark's smile was understanding. We all want to be good stewards of our resources. I can set up a structure through Panama that will... Before we go further, Brandon interrupted. I need to know something. Are you the same Glenn Stark who worked with Daryl Harrington? Stark's expression froze. I'm not sure what you're referring to. I think you are. I did my research. You ran Harrington's offshore accounts. Then he got arrested, and you disappeared. Brandon leaned forward. I need to know, if I work with you, am I going to end up in handcuffs like Harrington? Mr. Johnson, I assure you. Because if you're under investigation, I need to know now. My money, my risk. Stark's smile returned, but it was colder. Daryl Harrington was a client, yes. But I'm not responsible for his criminal activities. I simply provided financial services. And yes, I left the country when things got complicated, but that was precautionary. There are no charges against me. Actually, Brandon said, his voice steady, there are conspiracy, money laundering, racketeering. The FBI issued a warrant for your arrest 2 months ago. Stark started to stand. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Sit down, Mr. Stark. Something in Brandon's tone made Stark freeze. He looked around the restaurant, finally seeing what he should have seen from the beginning. The couple at the table near the window who were too alert, too focused. The waiter who stayed too close to their section. The man at the bar who wasn't drinking his beer. You're not Johnson, Stark said quietly. I'm Brandon Mitchell, Daryl Harrington's son-in-law. The one who found the evidence. The one who brought down your entire operation. Stark's face went white. He tried to run, but FBI agents were already moving. They had him on the ground in seconds, cuffed before he could reach the door. Canadian police entered from the back, securing the scene. Lewis appeared, grinning. Glenn Stark, you're under arrest. We'll be extraditing you to Connecticut to face charges. You have the right to remain silent. Brandon stood, his hands shaking slightly from adrenaline. He'd done it. They'd caught the last major player. On the flight back to Connecticut, Lewis sat next to him. You know that stunt you pulled could have gotten you killed. But it didn't. You're not an agent, Mitchell. You're a civilian. You need to let us do our job. I'm letting you do your job. I'm just assisting. Lewis shook his head, but he was smiling. When this is all over, if you ever want to apply to the FBI, let me know. We could use someone with your particular skill set. I'll think about it. But Brandon knew he wouldn't. He wasn't interested in making a career out of chasing criminals. He'd stumbled into this because a toy robot had evidence in its battery compartment. Once it was finished, he was going back to his quiet life as a software engineer and father. If Jillian would still have him. The trial began on September 12th, exactly as scheduled. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, victims, families, law enforcement. The prosecution team, led by Graciela Spears, was prepared for war. Daryl and Donna Harrington sat at separate defense tables with their respective attorneys. They hadn't spoken to each other in months. Whatever partnership they'd once had was broken. Opening statements took all morning. Spears laid out the government's case with precision. A massive criminal enterprise that had operated for over a decade, moving hundreds of victims across international borders, generating tens of millions in illegal profits. The defendants, she said, looking directly at the jury, treated human beings as commodities, as products to be bought, sold, transported, and exploited. They destroyed lives for profit. They showed no mercy to their victims. And now they will face justice. Crowley, Donna's attorney, argued that his client was a victim herself, coerced by her husband, trapped in an abusive relationship, forced to participate in activities she found abhorrent. Donna Harrington is not a monster. She's a woman who lived in fear for 30 years. A woman who finally found the courage to expose her husband's crimes. Israel Brock, Daryl's attorney, took a different approach. He suggested the evidence was tainted, that Brandon Mitchell had altered files, that the entire case was built on a foundation of family vendetta and reasonable doubt. The jury listened, took notes, showed no obvious reaction. Brandon attended every day of the trial, sat in the same seat, watched witnesses testify, watched Sonia Miller take the stand and, in a strong, clear voice, detail everything she knew about the Harringtons' operation. She was on the stand for 3 days, answering questions, holding up under cross-examination. She never broke. Victim after victim testified. Young women, now survivors, who described being lured from their homes, transported in containers, sold to the highest bidder. One woman, Melody, the one whose plea for help had changed Sonia's life, testified about meeting Donna Harrington. She looked at me, Melody said through tears, and she told me I should be grateful, that where I came from was worse than where I was, that I should smile more, be more grateful. The jury looked ill. Financial experts explained the money trail. Law enforcement detailed the investigation. Brandon himself took the stand for 2 days, walking the jury through finding the SD card, his decision to go to the FBI, his cooperation with the investigation. On cross-examination, Crowley tried to paint him as a man with an agenda. Mr. Mitchell, isn't it true that you never liked your in-laws? It's true that I had concerns about their business practices. Concerns? Or jealousy? Your father-in-law was wealthy, connected, powerful. You were a military man turned software engineer. Did that create resentment? No. What created concern was noticing inconsistencies in his business dealings. References to activities that didn't match his public persona. I didn't act on those concerns until I had evidence. Evidence you admit you handled alone, with no witnesses, before turning it over to authorities. Evidence I immediately copied and preserved to protect it from being destroyed or lost. Or altered. I didn't alter anything. Forensic analysis proved that. Forensic analysis performed by the FBI, the same FBI you called immediately. How convenient. Judge Dominguez interrupted. Counsel, unless you have evidence of tampering, move on. But the seed was planted. That's all Crowley needed. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Brandon watched every moment. He saw Daryl's facade crack when victim testimony became overwhelming. He saw Donna remain calm and collected until the financial evidence showed her direct involvement in transactions. Then something flickered in her eyes. Fear. On November 3rd, closing arguments began. Spears was magnificent, weaving together testimony and evidence into an undeniable narrative. The defendants want you to believe this was a misunderstanding. That evidence was tampered with. That they're victims. But you've heard from real victims. You've seen real evidence. You've heard from insiders who risked everything to expose the truth. She pointed at Daryl and Donna. These people are guilty. They knew what they were doing. They profited from suffering. They deserve to spend the rest of their lives in prison. The defense tried to poke holes, suggest doubt, appeal to sympathy. But the evidence was too overwhelming. The testimony too compelling. On November 10th, after 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned. Guilty on all counts. Both defendants. The courtroom erupted. Victims cried. Reporters rushed out to file stories. Brandon sat very still, feeling something he hadn't expected. Not triumph. Not even satisfaction. Just exhaustion. Sentencing was scheduled for December 15th. In the meantime, Brandon went home to his family. Jillian was waiting when he arrived. She'd watched the verdict on television. "It's over," he said. "Is it?" She looked at him. "Because I feel like we're still standing in the wreckage." "Maybe, but we can rebuild. Can we?" She sat on the couch, and he sat next to her. "Brandon, I don't know if I can forgive you for being right. For destroying my family. Your parents destroyed themselves. I know. Intellectually, I know that. But emotionally?" She shook her head. "I keep thinking about all the years I defended them. All the times you questioned things, and I shut you down. I enabled them. By defending them, by not looking closer, I enabled them. You didn't know. I didn't want to know. That's worse." She looked at him. "But I also know you did the right thing. You saved lives. You stopped something evil. And I'm proud of you for that. Even if I hate that it had to happen. Where does that leave us? I don't know. But I'm willing to find out. If you are." Brandon took her hand. "I am." Tommy came down the stairs, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Dad? You're home. Hey, champ. Come here." His son climbed into his lap, and they sat together, the three of them, in the quiet house, building something new from the ruins of what came before. At the sentencing hearing, Judge Dominguez listened to victim impact statements for an entire day. Women who'd survived the Harrington's operation stood up, one by one, and described what had been done to them. Described how it had shaped their lives, their trauma, their struggles to rebuild. Then Marta Wise, the social worker, testified about the long-term impacts of trafficking, the psychological damage, the difficulty of recovery. Finally, the judge spoke. "Daryl and Donna Harrington, you have been found guilty of running one of the most extensive and damaging human trafficking operations this country has ever seen. You treated people as property. You profited from their suffering. You showed no remorse, no humanity, no conscience." He looked at each of them in turn. "I'm sentencing you both to life in federal prison without possibility of parole. You will spend every remaining day of your lives locked away from society, unable to cause further harm." Daryl's face crumbled. Donna showed nothing. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I'm ordering the forfeiture of all assets connected to your criminal enterprise. Your properties, your accounts, everything will be seized and liquidated. The proceeds will go to a victim compensation fund." He banged his gavel. "This case is concluded." As they led the Harringtons away, Donna turned and looked at Brandon one last time. Her eyes were empty. She'd finally accepted that she'd lost. Brandon felt no satisfaction in her defeat, only a grim acknowledgement that justice, however imperfect, had been served. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Brandon gave a brief statement. "I'm grateful to the FBI, to prosecutors, to everyone who worked to bring these criminals to justice. But most of all, I'm grateful to the survivors who found the courage to testify. They're the real heroes." Lewis and Kay stood with him, fielding questions. Sonia Miller was there too, under martial protection, but she looked lighter somehow. "Free. Where will you go now?" Brandon asked her. "Somewhere quiet. Maybe teach. Try to help other victims." She smiled. "I owe you everything, Mr. Mitchell. You owe me nothing. You're the one who started this. You're the one who decided to fight. We both fought. We won." That evening, Brandon returned home to find his house decorated. Lights strung up, Tommy's favorite meal on the table. Jillian in the kitchen, wearing an apron, looking nervous. "What's all this?" "It's Christmas Eve," she said. "I know we haven't really celebrated since everything, but I thought maybe we could try. Start new traditions. Make new memories." Tommy ran in, showing Brandon a drawing he'd made. Their family, stick figures holding hands. "Look, Dad, it's us." Brandon felt emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "It's perfect, champ." They ate dinner together. watched a Christmas movie, put Tommy to bed. Then Jillian and Brandon sat by the tree. Modest this year, no gift from grandparents, but theirs. I've been thinking, Jillian said, about what happened, about everything. And I realized something. You didn't destroy our family. You saved us. If you hadn't acted, if you'd let my parents continue, eventually it would have all come crashing down. Tommy might have grown up connected to that. He might have been shaped by it. You stopped that. I just did what anyone should have done. No, you did what most people wouldn't have the courage to do. You stood up to power, to family, to everyone who told you to look the other way. You protected us. She took his hand. I want us to try again. Really try. Not just exist in the same house, but be a family. I'd like that. It won't be easy. I'm still processing. Still angry sometimes. Still grieving the parents I thought I had. I know, but I choose you. I choose us. I choose the man who'd risk everything to protect our son. They kissed, and for the first time in months, it felt like home. 6 months later, Brandon was in his office when Lewis called. Thought you'd want to know. Glenn Stark flipped. He's testifying against the international partners. We've taken down operations in 6 countries based on his information. So he gets a deal. Reduced sentence. 20 years instead of life. But he's giving us the whole network. It's worth it. And the victims? We've identified 217 now. Repatriated about half. The others are in various stages of asylum proceedings or protective custody. Marta Wise is coordinating a comprehensive support program. Your testimony about finding the evidence helped secure federal funding. Brandon felt pride in that. Real, genuine pride. How's the family? Lewis asked. Good. Really good. Tommy starts 3rd grade next week. Jillian went back to her job. She's teaching art at the community college. We're healing. You ever think about that offer? Joining the bureau? Every day. But my answer's still no. I'm good where I am. If you change your mind, you'll be the first call I make. Brandon hung up and looked at the photo on his desk. The 3 of them at the beach last month, Tommy building sandcastles, Jillian laughing. Normal. Happy. He thought about that Christmas morning almost a year ago when Tommy opened a toy robot and their lives changed forever. He thought about all the choices he'd made since then, all the risks he'd taken. He'd do it again. Every single decision. Because some things were worth fighting for. Justice. Family. Doing the right thing even when it cost everything. Tommy burst into the office, showing him a drawing from school. Look, Dad. I got an A. Brandon examined the picture. A superhero, cape flowing, standing tall. This is amazing, champ. What's his power? He helps people. Even when it's scary. Even when nobody else wants to. Brandon pulled his son into a hug. That's the best power anyone can have. That night, after Tommy was asleep and Jillian was reading in bed, Brandon went back to his office one last time. He opened his safe and pulled out the original SD card, the one he'd kept secured all these months. The evidence that had started everything. He held it for a long moment, remembering. Then he put it in an envelope, addressed it to the National Archives, and wrote a note. Evidence from United States versus Harrington. For historical record. So no one forgets what happened here. So no one forgets the victims. He sealed the envelope. Tomorrow, he'd mail it. Then he'd close this chapter of his life and focus on the future. On his family. On building something good from the ashes of something terrible. But tonight, he allowed himself a moment of reflection. A moment to acknowledge what had been sacrificed, what had been gained, and what it all meant. He'd been an ordinary man who stumbled onto extraordinary evil. He'd made choices that changed lives, his own, his family's, and dozens of victims who finally had justice. He wasn't a hero. Heroes were people like Sonia Miller, who'd worked inside the operation and found the courage to expose it. Heroes were the victims who'd testified despite their trauma. Brandon was just a father who'd protected his son, a husband trying to rebuild his marriage, a man who'd done what anyone should do when confronted with evil. He'd stood up. And in the end, that was enough. As he turned off his office light and headed upstairs to bed, where his wife waited and his son slept peacefully, Brandon Mitchell knew one thing with absolute certainty. He'd fight that battle again, 1,000 times over. Because that's what fathers did. That's what good men did. They fought for what was right, no matter the cost. And they never, ever looked away. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen, and I'll see you there.